My boss just claimed my cheating wife, you won't believe her shocking response. Every nerve in Jake's body felt electrified as he stared at his boss, Greg, standing there, eyes blazing like molten steel. The room went silent. Whispers floated around, a thrumming tension curling through the air, tightening Jake's chest. It wasn't just the words that cut deep, it was the way Greg smirked, like a wolf who had caught his prey. She's been seeing someone else, Greg declared, a devious glint flickering across his face. And that someone, is me. Shock rippled through the crowd gathered at Joe's bar. Eyes widened, faces froze. Wasn't he that Jake's wife, Samantha? The love of his life? The woman who promised him forever just last week? People leaned in, drinks forgotten, breath held. The clamor of the bar faded to nothing, all that remained was the pounding of Jake's heart, each beat demanding answers, then came the strange details, the uncovering of the bizarre truth. Jake had been piecing together the puzzling late nights, the hushed phone calls, Samantha's guard up like a fortress. But Greg? It sent a wave of disbelief crashing through him. No one would expect their boss to step into personal chaos, let alone dance with it. The implications were staggering. Meanwhile, Jake felt a lump form in his throat, dread pooling in his stomach. But just when things couldn't get crazier, Samantha arrived. She breezed in, her expression a twisted mix of defiance and confusion. The moment her eyes locked on Jake, the room felt like it was holding its breath again. What would she say? Would she scream? Apologize? No one knew her next move. Everyone was on edge, shifting from Jake to her, like a camera pivoting to capture the climax of a twisted thriller. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Samantha stepped forward, a chill settling into the air. You think you know everything, don't you, Greg? She croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. The crowd leaned in even closer, anticipation crackling like electricity. What could she possibly say that would change everyone's minds? Was this some grand revelation brewing? Jake's heart raced. He had to know, but what if this secret could shatter everything he believed? What if the woman he loved had something even darker hidden beneath her betrayal? The questions echoed, hanging heavy in the air, waiting for the truth to break loose, whatever that terrible truth might be. A tense silence filled the bar, the kind that thinly veils storms ready to break. Jake felt the pulsing heat of anger mixed with betrayal cooling into a hard knot in his belly. Samantha's eyes darted between him and Greg, a mix of fear and a flicker of something darker. Did she even care about the audience witnessing this horror? Could she possibly grasp how deeply this moment could bury him, how labels like crazy and jilted would cling to him after tonight? I have something to say, she finally declared, her voice louder now, a challenge to the chaos around her. And it's not what you think. Jake's breath caught. What was she going to reveal? There was an edge of desperation in her tone, but also a defiant flair that complicated his feelings. Greg isn't the only one with a secret, she declared, stepping closer to Jake, her eyes glistening. The murmurs around them swelled, rising like an unseen tide. I've been seeing someone too, a chorus of gasps echoed, as if the air in the room would shatter like glass. Jake's heart dropped. It was a sickening lurch, like being thrown off a roller coaster. Was she saying Jake wasn't the only one hurt? The shakes of confusion ran through him like a bitter infection, burning through his disbelief. The crowd leaned in even closer, one collective breath switching from curiosity to horror in an instant. Greg stood frozen, the earlier smug confidence draining from his face. What are you talking about, Sam? I thought we had something real. Real? You mean like a business deal? She shot back, her voice steady despite the tremors running through the room. How could I have ever loved a man who feeds on other people's pain? Instantly, Jake's heart raced not just from pain but excitement. Here was a flicker of resolve, a sliver of themselves fighting back against the chaos. But he knew it was a shaky ground, the truth had claws, and neither of them knew just how deep those wounds would cut. I can't believe this. Greg sputtered. You'll regret this, Sam. Maybe, she replied, a surprisingly calm certainty floating through her words. But I'd rather regret telling the truth than living a lie. With those words, the bar felt electric, as if the very walls breathed with the weight of hidden secrets. What was she about to say? Samantha took a deep breath, steadying herself as the crowd held its breath. I've been seeing Jake's brother. Gasps erupted. Jake staggered back, limbs stricken with disbelief. His brother? The one person he trusted? That betrayal cut deeper, sharper than any knife. Wait! A voice shouted from the crowd, dragging everyone's attention back. This can't be what it looks like. But Jake was no longer listening. He felt invisible now, lost in a whirlwind of deception. Anger clawed at him, pushing him to confront her. How could she? How could they, both of them? But deep down, shadows whispered questions he didn't want to confront. What else lay buried in this tangled web? Each revelation felt like a thread unwinding a chaos that could swallow them all. With Samantha's gaze piercing through him, Jake tightened his fists, preparing his response. Somewhere, in the back of his mind, a plan was forming, one that would challenge the very foundations of loyalty and love. And just as he opened his mouth to speak, the ground beneath him shook. The bar's entrance burst open, the clatter of boots echoing and shattering the entire tension, the kind of interruption that invited even more chaos. Jake! A voice boomed, cutting through the noise. We need to talk now. What new disaster was unveiling in the background? Jake turned towards the door, heart racing, stunned by the implications. Energy crackled as shadows closed in, and he braced himself for whatever was waiting on the other side. Jake's eyes darted to the entrance, narrowing at the figure striding through the threshold. It was Mark, his older brother. The tension in the bar pulsated like a living thing, thick and suffocating, as Jake's mind reeled. Mark wasn't meant to be here. Not in this moment. But there he was, chest puffed, face taut with urgency. Did you hear me? Mark called again, his voice cutting through the chaotic murmurs like a knife. The crowd began parting, a path forming as Mark moved forward, his gaze locked on Jake. We need to leave right now. What is going on? Jake spat, anger igniting another wave in his already turbulent emotions. The thought of leaving this moment and Samantha's shocking confession behind made every nerve in his body twitch with frustration. This isn't the place, bro, trust me. Mark's voice dropped, urgency replaced by an undertone of menace. Jake's heart raced, confusion giving way to an unsettling apprehension. The last few feet between them felt like a chasm, filled with questions that buzzed louder than the bar's atmosphere. Samantha's face crumpled as she glanced between the brothers, sensing the shift. Jake, don't. If he wants to talk, let him talk. But Jake's thoughts were spiraling. Was he supposed to care about anything else right now? Betrayal lingered in the air. You. He shouted at Samantha, his voice cracking. You think now's the moment to play the innocent victim? You think you can pin everything on me? Samantha looked wounded but fierce, her eyes glinting with unbroken defiance. This is bigger than all of us, Jake. You need to hear him out. Mark shot a warning look over his shoulder, the crowd's buzz now a faint whisper echoing the looming concern. There's trouble, and not just between you two. What kind of trouble? Asked Greg, who had finally reclaimed some courage. He stepped closer, confusion mingling with a desperate need to understand. What the hell are you talking about? Mark ignored him, focusing solely on Jake. I'm serious. This is about your mother. She's in danger. Those words severed the air, halting Jake's rising fury. His mother? Confusion morphed into fear, and in an instant, all the emotional noise dissolved. What do you mean? What happened? Just come on. We need to talk outside. Mark's eyes darted frantically as if he feared an unseen threat creeping closer. Jake felt the walls of the bar closing in, their secret world suddenly feeling paranoid and small. He cast a glance at Samantha, trying to interpret her expression. Her defiance wavered, replaced by concern. "I'll be right back," Jake muttered, more to himself than to anyone. He turned and followed Mark, breaking free from the electrified crowd that had trapped him in a tableau of betrayal. As the brothers pushed through the bar's heavy door, the cool night air struck them like a slap. But even as he stepped outside, doubts trickled through Jake's mind. Was this really about their mother? Or something darker? Those questions loomed heavy over Jake as he turned back to his brother, preparing for whatever nightmare was about to be unveiled. "Tell me everything," Jake urged, desperation clawing at his throat. And just as Mark began to speak, a distant sound cut through the night, a single gunshot that echoed like thunder. The world around him narrowed, fear stealing breath as Jake's stomach dropped. "Mark, what is happening?" But Mark was already on high alert, eyes scanning the horizon. Something was lurking, something far worse than a simple family argument or infidelity. Had their chaotic night just begun? Jake's heart thundered in his chest, each beat matching the rising dread that clawed at his thoughts. The gunshot rang again, sharper this time, and he could taste the metallic tang of fear in the air. "Mark!" he yelled, panic gripping his voice. "What do we do?" Mark's hands were clenched into fists. "We stay away from the bar. That shot, it wasn't meant for us, but it's south too close for comfort." He shifted his weight, scanning the street, his eyes darting like they were trying to catch shadows. "Let us get to the truck. Now." Jake's gut twisted. His mother was in danger, Mark had said, and now there was a shooting outside. Everything felt entwined, like strands of a fraying rope. "What the hell is going on? Just tell me." He pressed. Mark hesitated, a breath lingering on the edge of his lips. Finally, he exhaled. "I'm not sure, but someone sent a message. It involves Mom and Mom." "What did you get her into this time?" Mark's jaw tensed. "It's not what she's gotten into, it's what's coming for her. You need to trust me here." A third gunshot echoed, slicing the night air, and Jake flinched. Footsteps thundered behind them, and the crowd from the bar began spilling out, faces contorted in confusion and fear. Instinct kicked in. He turned on his heel, pulling Mark along. "We have to go." As they raced down the alley beside the bar, the air crackled with the shouting voices of confused patrons. "Hey! Where are you two going?" someone yelled, but Jake didn't stop. He felt a possession, a primal urge to protect Mark and himself. The truck was parked a few blocks away, but it felt like miles. With each hurried step, dread clung to him, handcuffing his thoughts. "If this is about Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner?" Mark shot him a worried glance. "What was I supposed to say? That I was being watched? That the people I owe money to are hunting us down? What?" Jake felt the ground tilt beneath him. "You've been running from something. From someone?" Mark's silence was deafening. They reached the truck, and as Jake fumbled for the door handle, he caught sight of a figure emerging from the shadows across the street. "Mark! Someone's coming!" Mark jerked his head, eyes widening as the figure stepped into the streetlight. Jake's stomach dropped. It was a face he recognized all too well. It was Frank, the man he'd seen arguing with Mark weeks ago, his expression dark, eyes cold as ice. "Jake, get in!" Mark barked. With a jolt, Jake jumped inside the cab, heart racing both from fear and disbelief at the situation spiraling faster than he could process. Mark slid into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. "Lock the doors." Jake fumbled with the lock, but Mark's face was already pale as he looked through the rearview mirror. "He knows we're here." The air turned electric, and for a moment, everything faded: the noise, the crowd, even the fear. It was just them against something larger. Just as Mark turned on the ignition, a shadow advanced toward them, stepping into the light with a chilling grin. "Thought you could escape, did you?" The voice sent a shiver down Jake's spine, tightening his chest. Not a chance. Jake's breath hitched as realization crashed over him. This was no ordinary threat. "Mark, we need to move. Now." A desperate urgency shot through him. There was no room for hesitation. But even as the engine roared to life, Jake couldn't shake off the creeping dread that they might be too late. "Get ready, brother." But even as Mark pressed the gas, the world outside spun into chaos. What terrifying game were they now a part of? Mark slammed the gas pedal, sending the truck lurching forward with a screech. The tires bit into the pavement, and Jake's heartbeat raced, echoing in his ears. The noise of the world outside faded into a blur of chaos, but Jake's focus was locked on Frank, who lunged after them, arms outstretched like a predator ready to pounce. "Don't look back!" Mark shouted, his voice strained as he fought to gain control over the truck's lurching speed. Jake's hands trembled, gripping the dashboard as they shot past startled onlookers, their faces painted with confusion and fear. The bar behind them faded into the distance, but the dread lingering in the air chased them. "Where do we go?" Jake gasped, panic rising like bile in his throat. Every instinct screamed at him, digging deep into his gut. "We can't just drive aimlessly." "There's a spot," Mark said, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "An old warehouse on the edge of town. We can hide there for now." The name sent a jolt through Jake. The warehouse was where Mark had been with that crew, a rough crowd that made Jake uncomfortable just thinking about it. That crew? "Aren't you worried they'll just drag us back into this mess?" Mark grimaced, his jaw set in determination. "I'm worried about a lot of things, but right now, we need a breather." He twisted the wheel, the truck swinging towards a side street that led away from the main road. As they navigated through tight, darkened streets, a chilling silence fell. The adrenaline from the chase began to chill, replaced by a haunting void. "What is going on, Mark? What kind of mess have you really gotten us into?" Mark's expression tightened, eyes narrowing as if trying to shield himself from the truth he knew was coming. "I made a deal, all right. Something about money that shouldn't have been touched. It spiraled. They think your mom knows something she doesn't. But that doesn't make sense." "She's just I know," Mark interjected, cutting him off. "But they don't care. Their logic is about control, and right now, she's a pawn in their game." Jake felt sharp anger surfacing. "So, we just run? Leave her to deal with whatever they want?" "Stop!" Mark slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt just shy of a dilapidated building. He turned to Jake, fury and desperation mingling in his gaze. "You need to understand. It's not that simple. There are things happening that are bigger than us." Jake's breath quickened, the gravity of their situation pressing down on him like lead. "She's my mom. I can't just let them use her like that." Mark sighed, his shoulders sagging. "I'm with you, all right. But we need a plan. We can't just charge back in without knowing what we're facing. They're ruthless." Before Jake could respond, a chilling sound sliced through the quiet, a cacophony of shouting voices around the corner. Shadows began moving, slipping into view from the alleyway, their movements low and threatening. "Mark!" Jake whispered, his throat tightening as fear gnawed at him. "I see them." Mark's voice dropped to almost a hiss. "Get ready." The shadows were gaining ground, and Jake's mind raced. This wasn't just about surviving a night anymore, it felt like they were on the brink of something darker, something that threatened to pull them into a nightmare they might never escape. "Stay low," Mark instructed, voice tense. As the voices grew louder, a figure broke from the darkness, a man with a familiar face. Jake's heart sank as recognition dawned. It's Frank. He was blocking their only exit, and behind him, more figures emerged. Jake's pulse quickened. What do we do now? Caught in a web of fear and loyalty, Jake knew they were running out of time. Would they find a way out, or had they walked headfirst into their worst nightmare? The air thickened with tension as Frank stepped closer, a sinister grin spreading across his face. Nice ride, boys. You really think you could just leave us behind? Jake felt his stomach twist. There was something in Frank's eyes, a promise of violence. More shadows emerged from the alley, faces obscured but their intentions clear. Mark, Jake whispered, his voice barely a breath. We can't take them all. Shut up and listen, Mark growled, urgency sharpening every word. We need to act fast. When I give the signal, we make a break for it. What's your signal? A death wish? Jake snapped, fear and anger colliding. Frank chuckled, his tone mocking. You're not in control here, Mark. You should be known that. Mark's eyes darted around, searching for any way out. Jake's heart raced in rhythm with the feet shuffling closer. Each step they took echoed like a countdown. Listen, Frank, Mark said, his voice steadying, I don't want trouble. We can talk this out. Talk. Frank's laughter was sharp, cruel. You think I want to talk? You've put me in a position I can't walk away from. You think you're bluffing, but I'll show you just how serious I can be. A dark knot formed in Jake's chest. He had to think. There was a window, barely cracked, above the truck. If he could just get Mark to. A sudden sound interrupted his thoughts, a heavy thud as one of the shadows stumbled forward, tripping over a loose cobblestone, landing hard against the truck. The man cursed, scrambling to upright himself. That was it, the distraction Jake needed. Now! Jake shouted, throwing open the passenger side door. Without waiting for Mark, he bolted straight for the warehouse, the edge of his vision catching Mark's startled face before he dove after him. Hey! Frank roared, his voice dark and strangling. Get back here. Jake didn't look back. Fear propelled him forward. He slid into the dimly lit warehouse, the air stale and heavy, smelling of old wood and rust. The sound of footsteps pounded behind them, urgency closing in like a predator. Where now? Jake gasped, scanning the vast, shadowy space for a place to hide. Over there. Mark pointed to a stack of crates piled in a corner, their abandoned edges offering a crude shelter. They ducked behind it just as the footsteps approached, Jake's breath coming in sharp bursts, adrenaline thrumming through him. Did they see us? Jake whispered, adrenaline coursing through him as he tried to still his racing heart. Don't move, Mark replied, his voice low, tense. They both held their breaths, straining to hear. The footsteps stopped. There was a long pause, filled only with the creaking of old metal and their own insistent heartbeats. I know you're in here. Frank shouted, his voice slicing through the silence. Come out, and I'll make it quick. Resist, and things are going to get messy. Jake felt a shiver race down his spine. Frank wouldn't hesitate. All those stories he'd heard about him came flooding back, the brutality, the ruthlessness. What do we do? Jake hissed, his mind racing. What if he calls reinforcements? Mark's jaw was clenched, eyes simmering with thoughts that swirled dangerously. We need to figure out a way to outsmart him. We can't stay trapped here forever. Just then, a noise caught Jake's attention. A figure appeared at the far end of the warehouse. This one wasn't Frank, it was someone else, someone who looked equally menacing. Who the hell is that? Jake whispered, panic surging as another potential threat entered their fragile world. Mark's eyes widened, and a creeping fear washed over his face. This isn't just about us anymore. The figures moved closer, a chilling realization dawning on Jake. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, he was now entwined in a game he didn't even understand, and the stakes just got much higher. "Get ready," Mark muttered, his determination reigniting. "This is about to get real." Jake's heart beat louder than ever, and he braced himself for whatever was coming next. How could they possibly escape this impending storm? Jake's veins filled with ice as the new figure stepped into a slant of flickering light, revealing a tight-lipped woman with dark eyes that surveyed the hidden duo with unnerving calm. She wasn't alone, two more men flanked her, lean and muscular, their hands resting casually on their hips, as if ready to spring into action at any moment. "Are we interrupting something?" the woman asked, an unsettling smile creeping across her face. Mark shifted slightly, muscles tense under his skin. "We, don't want any trouble." "Too bad," she replied, voice smooth as silk but tainted with malice. "Trouble likes you." Jake's instincts screamed at him to run, but the weight of his feet glued him to the spot. He and Mark exchanged a glance, the question remaining unvoiced. Was it better to stay hidden or risk the chaos of a confrontation? "Frank is looking for you, boys," the woman continued, her tone almost playful. "You've made quite the mess." "Then he shouldn't have made it personal," Mark shot back, trying to sound braver than he felt. A faint chuckle escaped her lips. "Personal? No, this is strictly business. You've stolen something from Frank, a precious cargo, if you will. You leave him no choice." Jake felt a knot tighten in his throat, realization dawned like cold sweat trickling down his back. The cargo, the shipment, it wasn't just about the money, this was something deeper, something dangerous. "Look," Mark said, desperation creeping into his voice, "we can talk this out, figure something out. Just enough." The woman's tone flipped like a switch, the darkness edging her smile deepening. "You can save your breath. You're in way too deep already." The shadows shifted outside. Jake caught movement in his peripheral vision. Frank's crew was closing in. He glanced back at Mark, hope dwindled in their eyes. "Are they here for us?" Jake whispered, panic rising. "Of course they are," the woman answered, amusement dancing in her voice. "And you should be scared. Very scared." Just then, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse, sending reverberations racing along the walls. The sound of heavy footsteps rushed closer, drowning out the silence with an insistent pounding. Frank was coming, and with him, chaos. The woman turned toward the noise, her facade of control slipping for just a moment. "Looks like your friends are eager to play." The air thickened once more, Jake's heart hammering like a drum. Frantically, he scanned for any possible escape route. The warehouse was a maze of shadows and danger, every dark corner held uncertainty. "Mark, we need to move," Jake hissed, low but urgent. He didn't want to be trapped. Mark nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. They were cornered, and hope seemed to vanish like mist. Then, with a rush, Jake darted toward a stack of crates to his right. "This way!" he shouted, adrenaline igniting his instinct to survive. He glanced back, hoping to see Mark following, but the scene unfolded in slow motion. Before he could register what was happening, the woman lunged forward, blocking Mark's path. "Going somewhere?" Mark faltered, and Jake's chest tightened. There was no time to waste, no room for hesitation. "Run!" Jake barked, desperation coloring his voice. He didn't look back to see if Mark followed. He had to believe in their shared resolve. He sprinted deeper into the darkness of the warehouse, the fear of losing Mark fueling his every step. The chaos erupted behind him, shouts and jeers, the sound of bodies colliding, and then a piercing holler that sent chills through him. Where was Mark? Had he managed to escape with him? Suddenly, a door at the far end of the warehouse swung open, spilling a washed-out light onto the concrete floor. It was a sliver of hope, but would it lead to salvation or disaster? Jake dashed toward it, heart pounding, but the shadows loomed behind him. He could feel Frank's crew not far behind, determined to snuff out their fleeting chance at freedom. "Mark!" Jake yelled, breathless panic laced in his voice. A sudden silence fell around him, broken only by a figure blocking the doorway, a tall, imposing man with gleaming eyes that knew no mercy. "Out of options, huh?" he taunted. As Jake's back hit the wall, fear coiling tightly around him, he realized that perhaps the true storm was not just the imminent threat from Frank's crew but the revelations that lay ahead. In that moment, he understood whatever came next would change everything. Could they withstand the storm, or were they destined to be lost in the shadows? Panic clawed at Jake's throat. He felt the walls of the warehouse closing in. He glanced behind him, desperate to spot Mark, but the chaos roared like a wild beast. Sounds of heavy footsteps, shouting voices, and breaking glass invaded his senses. "Going to play hero?" The tall man stepped closer, his smile sinister, every inch of him radiating an unfathomable power. Jake took a shaky breath, the cold air flooding his lungs, mingling with the metallic taste of fear. "I'm not playing anything," he shot back, voice trembling despite his attempts to stand firm. "Sure you are." The man's eyes glinted as he leaned in, almost savoring the moment. "You're in over your head. Frank isn't your typical boss, he doesn't like mistakes." The lights flickered above, casting eerie shadows that danced across Jake's face. Chaos swirled around him, but in this moment, it was like time stood still, leaving just him and the man before him. "What do you want?" Jake pressed, his heart racing, prepared for anything. "Simple," he replied with an unsettling calmness. "You return what you stole and leave this place," or the crash of a crate stealing the moment as tension pierced through the warehouse. Jake's instincts kicked in. The momentary distraction could be their only shot at freedom. "Run!" he yelled, breaking from the man's taunting gaze and bolting toward the open door. He didn't look back. He sprinted into the blinding light, each step fueled by the desperation to escape. Outside, the night air hit him like a refreshing slap, but he didn't slow down. He darted around the corner of the building, searching for anything that would give him cover, but as he plunged deeper into the shadows, he realized it wasn't just Frank's crew hunting him. A different danger lurked. He could hear muffled voices coming from the alley behind the warehouse, a low mix of anger and uncertainty. "Where's Jake?" "Mark." Relief coursed through him at the sound of his friend's voice. He rushed around the corner to find a breathless Mark, pinned against a brick wall, his face pale. "Did they follow?" Mark asked, urgency in his tone. "I don't know," Jake admitted, glancing back toward the warehouse, still teeming with shadows. "We have to keep moving." "Movements make noise," Mark whispered, barely keeping his voice steady as loud shouts erupted from the warehouse. "We can't afford to. All we have is running," Jake insisted, sweat trickling down his brow. "I can't let them get you." "Not now." "But what if we get trapped?" "Guess we'll find out," Jake replied grimly. Suddenly, a sound ominous and dreadful echoed from just outside their hiding place. A group of men walked into view, their eyes scanning the area, determined and ruthless. Jake's stomach dropped as he recognized one of them. Frank. The sight of him sent icy tendrils snaking down Jake's spine. Frank's presence promised only peril. He glanced to Mark, who wore a look of pure dread. "What do we do?" Mark panted, fear palpable in his blue eyes. "Hide," Jake whispered, and they both pressed back further into the shadows, hoping their desperation wouldn't betray them. The oppressive silence weighed heavily as Frank's crew moved closer. Jake's pulse raced louder than any footfall could. Suddenly, Frank's voice pierced through the dark. "They've got nowhere left to run." The prospect of being cornered wrapped itself around Jake like a vice. How could they possibly escape this nightmare? But before he could decipher a plan, footsteps halted abruptly, and a sudden shout pierced the air. "There they are." All hope seemed lost as Jake and Mark exchanged terrified glances. They were trapped. In that moment, Jake realized the stakes had just escalated. The storm wasn't just about survival, something much darker loomed ahead. What had they stumbled into, and could they really outmaneuver the wrath of Frank and his crew? As adrenaline pumped through his veins, one question dominated his mind: would they emerge from this alive, or was this the end of everything they had fought for? Jake's heart thundered in his chest, the sound almost drowning out Frank's snarled commands. Adrenaline surged through him, and he could hardly think straight. The alley felt impossibly narrow, a suffocating tunnel of darkness. Frank's crew loomed ahead, blocking any chance of escape. "Get ready," Jake murmured to Mark, his voice barely above a whisper. The frantic glimmer in Mark's eyes told him that his friend was just as terrified. "Do you have a plan?" Mark swallowed hard, his body tense as a coiled spring. "Not yet, but we can't stay here," Jake replied. He peered cautiously around the corner, trying to assess his options. Frank's men were converging on their position, and the unmistakable hiss of a Zippo lighter being flicked open sent flames of horror through his gut. They were about to torch the alley. "Jake, move!" Mark grabbed his arm, pulling him further back into the shadows as the blaze flickered to life behind them. The intense heat kissed their skin, and panic ignited a new fire within Jake. He pivoted on his heel, searching for any glimmer of hope. "Back the way we came!" he shouted, urgency fueling his feet. They rushed down the alley, the roar of flames behind them adding a sense of urgency that felt like a living thing crawling up Jake's spine. "Where? There's no way out." Mark gasped, glancing back at the advancing figures. "We can't let them corner us." Jake's mind raced. The weight of panic clawed at him, but he drove it down. "We go left at the next street." The alley twisted and turned, and Jake prayed for the safety of the corner ahead. They dashed around it, praying for enough distance to find refuge in the maze of buildings. Jake spotted a half-open door and abandoned shop. "Inside!" he shouted, barely catching Mark's expression of doubt before dragging him through the doorway. They slammed it behind them, hearts pounding in their ears, desperate to block out the chaos outside. Inside, the dim light revealed shattered glass and dusty shelves filled with broken relics. The smell of decay enveloped them as they crouched behind the counter, breaths ragged and their bodies trembling. Mark peered toward the window, worry etched into his features. "What if they find us?" "Then we have to make a stand," Jake replied, his voice steadying as resolve ignited in his soul. "But we'll have the element of surprise." They listened, the sounds of the bustling street fading to a haunting silence. Who would come looking? The real question loomed larger: were they truly safe in this hiding place? "I can't believe we're in this mess," Mark said suddenly, his voice cracking. "How did it come to this?" Jake felt the weight of those words. They had been just two guys trying to make ends meet. Until now. "Because we trusted the wrong people," Jake answered. "And it's about to cost us everything." Above them, the fluorescent bulbs flickered ominously, casting ghastly shadows across the broken floor. Then, unexpectedly, a loud bang shook the door they had just sealed. Both men drew back instinctively, the sound echoing with a dreadful finality. "Get ready!" Jake hissed, adrenaline pumping anew. "Do you hear that?" Mark whispered, eyes wide with fear. A murmur as familiar as it was unsettling drifted through the cracks. "Freaking Frank," Jake muttered under his breath, realizing their main tormentor was on the hunt, searching for them with relentless determination. The pounding intensified, and Jake's heart raced as he clutched a forgotten bottle from the shelf, his makeshift weapon. As the door rattled on its hinges, ready to burst open, Jake caught sight of a flickering shadow cast by the surrounding light. What if Frank had more than just muscle on his side? What horrifying twists awaited them once the door swung wide? Mark's voice was barely audible, the fear thick in the air. "Stay close," Jake commanded, ready to face the chaos that awaited. Whatever horror came next, they would confront it together. And then the door groaned and swung slowly open, an intense darkness spilling in. What emerged, the truth in those shadows would change everything. Would. They finally learn who truly held the reins in this game of survival. Jake's heart raced as he braced for whatever horror awaited them. The heavy door swung wide, creaking like an ominous harbinger. Shadows danced, cloaked figures emerging from darkness, blending into a storm of uncertainty. Each heartbeat thundered in his ears, triumph and despair battling for dominion over his thoughts. "Show yourself." Frank barked, his voice like gravel, echoing through the hollow space. He stepped forward, flanked by his crew men ready to unleash chaos. Their leering faces shone with a predatory glint, eyes fixating on Jake and Mark. "Jake, we can fight," Mark whispered, fists clenched tight, but doubt dripped like poison from every word. Jake shook his head, urgency slicing razor-thin through the room. They weren't ready. The numbers were overwhelming. With a deep breath, Jake held up the glass bottle, brandishing it like a shield. "You'll have to get through me first," he challenged, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his insides. Frank's smirk twisted into a grim line, amusement flickering in his dark eyes. "Brave words, but you're just a scared little boy," he sneered, stepping closer. "You want out of this mess. You need to play the game. Admit who you are, what you've done." The truth burned in Jake's chest. His past mistakes echoed like a haunting melody. "I'm not just going to hand over everything," he shot back, indignation fueling his voice. "I'll never give up my family, not to you." "Ah, family." Frank's tone turned mocking. Such a powerful word. "But remember, Jake, family can also be a weakness. We want your mother, dear brother, and you're just too valuable a pawn in this game to let go." The weight of Frank's threats hit like a freight train. Jake's chest tightened, panic clawed at his throat. This was it. Their endgame was closer than they realized. Behind Frank, his crew shifted restlessly. They were growing impatient, hungry for action. Suddenly, the flickering overhead lights snapped off, plunging the room into chaos, a desperate gambit. Jake seized the moment. He turned to Mark, eyes fierce. "Now. Run." They bolted into the shadows, feeling the pulse of adrenaline surge through their veins as they dashed through the darkness, the echo of pounding footsteps following in a reckless frenzy. "Which way?" Mark gasped, desperation rising in his tone. "Anywhere but here." Jake shouted back, scanning the dimly lit surroundings. Before them lay a narrow corridor leading deeper into the shop, an unknown labyrinth filled with seemingly endless possibilities. They sprinted, hearts thrumming, just as they rounded a corner, a familiar face emerged, silver hair glinting in the dull light. Their mother, her eyes wide with panic, grasped onto the edge of the counter. "Jake! Mark! I was looking for you." Relief washed over Jake, but it was quickly overshadowed by dread. "Mom, you need to get out. I can't leave you," she cried, an edge of fear coloring her voice. "Please, trust us. We'll figure this out together," Jake insisted, his eyes pleading. The ground shook as Frank and his men stormed through the doorway, laughter intertwined with threats echoing behind them. Time fractured, each second stretched into eternity, but Jake's mind raced, crafting desperate plans. "Over here," Mark suddenly shouted, pointing to a back exit dimly lit but promising freedom. "Go, now." Jake pushed his mother forward, urging her with a powerful shove. They darted toward the opening as the cold night air beckoned beyond. Just as they reached the exit, gunshots rang through the corridor, shattering the fragile silence. Jake felt the world pitch in slow motion, the sound of glass shattering, fragments of hope crackling around them. He turned, reached out, and pulled Mark backward, just as a bullet grazed his shoulder. Pain lanced through his being, sent waves of adrenaline surging through him. "Mom!" he yelled, the urgency scalding his throat. "I'm here, Jake," she shouted back, struggling to keep pace. As they burst through the doorway, the outside world enveloped them in chaos. The chilly night air filled their lungs, fresh and full of promise, but Danger still loomed. Jake gritted his teeth, blood trickling down his arm, and they sprinted into the alley where a dim light flickered at the far end. They charged forward, the threat of Frank's crew at their heels. "Where are we going?" his mother cried, breathless. "We'll find safety." "We will," Jake called. There had to be a way out. There had to be as they approached the next corner, a rumble of engines interrupted the chaotic atmosphere. A truck screeched to a halt, lights blinding them as Jake turned to see a familiar face behind the wheel, his friend Danny. "Get in!" he shouted, urgency lacing his voice. "Go, go!" Mark yelled, shoving their mother inside as Jake glanced back at the pursuing shadows. This was their moment, one last shot at freedom. "Let us move!" Jake shouted, diving into the passenger seat beside Mark. The engine roared to life, tires screeched, and they peeled away just as the first bullets pinged against metal. He exhaled, tension easing slightly, but dread still gripped his heart. They escaped, but at what cost? What damage lay in the wake of this terrifying night? As they raced into the darkness, Jake realized this wasn't just about survival anymore. He had to confront the hurt that lingered, the chaos left behind. No more running. It was time to face the storm, no matter how fierce. "Jake, you all right?" Danny glanced over, concern etching his features. "You look like hell." "Let us get out of here first," Jake replied, determination hardening. "Then we'll figure everything out." So they sped into the night, the chaos behind them diminishing but not fading entirely. Shadows of betrayal lingered, but so did the flicker of hope. The world outside may have crumbled, but together, they could rebuild. They would confront the truth, reclaim their lives. And no matter what it took, Jake swore he'd protect his family come hell or high water. Now listen up. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and keep these amazing adventures coming. Also, flood the comments section below with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. Your voices matter. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Real fans understand how important it is to support the channel in these ways.